Today is Thursday, August 4th. This is the Just Baseball Show. Jack McMullen, not Peter Apple. He's taking tonight to get his studio apartment in Manhattan just kind of set up and good to go. So I recruited good buddy, managing editor at Just Baseball, Ryan Finkelstein, and we're going to talk about Contenders and what they did at the trade deadline. Fink is the host of Locked On Mets. We're going to talk about the Mets, but we're pretty much going to fly through every team that can plausibly make a run at a pennant and a World Series win. We're going to look at what they did during the trade deadline and then decide if they actually improved or just kind of stagnated, because I think we saw a lot of teams that didn't make as many moves as we were thinking. Obviously, one team just kind of trumped all in terms of the trade deadline headlines, but there were a lot of teams that were a bit more quiet than we were expecting, right?
It's funny because I remember, I think it was John Paul Morosi. He tweeted out 48 hours before the deadline, this is going to be the craziest deadline ever. It really wasn't, right? There was the Juan Soto trade in the morning, and then it just kind of sat there, and there wasn't as much movement as we thought. Wilson Contreras, Ian Happ put, and the Tigers. I mean, we could talk about some of those teams just not selling. I don't know if it's the sellers didn't, or set the prices too high, or the buyers just didn't want to push their chips all the way in. But it's like there was a big game of chicken around the league. And I look up now and I'm like, outside of a select few teams, the Yankees, the Padres, the Twins, maybe the Mariners, there hasn't been wholesale changes with really a lot of these contenders, honestly.
A lot of these contenders, I'm with you. And yes, Soto dominated the headlines. Understandably so. It is the biggest, according to Tim Kurkjian, who, just got enshrined in Cooperstown. Totally believe everything Tim Kurkjian says. According to Tim Kurkjian, the biggest deal in Major League Baseball history. Obviously, you can look back at the Babe Ruth sale from the Red Sox to the Yankees, but that was a player sale. That was not a trade. And you're not getting Mackenzie Gore and Robert Hassel and a 6'7", 250 low A guy that hits nukes in James Wood in return for Babe Ruth. You got it for Juan Soto. Just watching the scenes a couple minutes ago before we hopped on to record late night on Wednesday, I mean, that ballpark, Petco Park, with Soto making his debut, with Bell making his debut, with Drury making his debut, with the Grand Slam, I mean, that place was insane. It was lit up. So you have some teams that invigorated their fan bases, and then you've got other teams like my White Sox that pissed him off because the big move was swapping Reese McGuire for Jake Diekman. There were a lot of teams that just kind of functioned like that. And I'm with you. And I'm glad you brought up that JP Morosi tweet because, the big moves were really big, but Pablo didn't move. Wilson and Happ didn't move. There were a couple other guys that just kind of stayed put. And it was really weird, but we're going to hop into the contenders. First and foremost, and we'll get to the Mets in the back half of this, we'll go AL by division, then we'll go NL by division. Are you happy with what the Mets did? It was Vogelbach, and then it was a couple other minor moves right at the deadline, right?
Yeah, I mean, I like the Vogelbach, Darren Ruff platoon. I actually think that that's a lot better than people really understand it to be, because you're just saying a couple of guys. And I think fans look at the wholesale numbers and man, this guy's not that good. But if you remove the bad half of their platoon, if you take the left-handed, facing lefties out of Vogelbach, facing righties out of Ruff stats, it's a really good player that they got together when you combine them. So I thought that was good. I thought it was funny today that Michael Givens makes his Mets debut, and the entire narrative yesterday was they did not do enough to address their bullpen, and the one guy they get gives up 5 runs in his debut. So I was actually not even checking Twitter today. I don't want to see what kind of meltdown Mets fans were having, but I think overall they did enough. And I also watched Jacob Degrom pitch on a big league mound last night. So that's kind of something that I think is a big story that comes out of the deadline. That's not a trade here.
Okay, so before we start with the Yankees, Jacob Degrom on a big league mound, third pitch he threw was 102, painted lower outside corner. So there are two ways to look at that. There are two schools of thought. Number one is, oh my God, the king is back. And I'm sure that's how you felt. Number two for me was, I'm trying to think about how many bullets Jacob Degrom has left. And I see 102 on the black in his first appearance of the season on his third pitch. I'm terrified because I feel like something is going to tweak. We've talked about it on this show. I don't think the human body is structured, is developed over generations to throw 102 miles an hour constantly as a starting pitcher. When you saw 102 painted, What did you feel?
Well, I mean, look, as a fan, my gut reaction was just like, one, did that actually say 102?
Yeah.
And I am so happy he's back. But yeah, every single pitch, you're kind of wincing, like, what's going to happen here? The thing about Jacob Degrom is when he started throwing harder, and this is again, we're talking about, 2018, 2019, 2020. It keeps on climbing every single year. And last year was, I mean, the most of it, where every single pitch seemed to be 99 plus with this fastball. What he was saying is that he has trusted his mechanics more, and that has allowed for more velocity. Now, I don't know how to feel about him with the adrenaline spike and throwing 102. I think you have to think maybe that's a little bit of him, kind of getting carried away. But I don't know. You watch him pitch, and it doesn't look like he's muscling up. It's
Right.
it's absolute, pristine mechanics. It's perfect. And I don't know. It's one of those things where I'm just hoping that if I'm optimistic enough, he'll stick around for the rest of the season and be healthy, because the idea of Scherzer and DeGrom, I still don't think that we've fully comprehended that's going to mean for this Mets team.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of videos from you on Twitter that you put out with like this maniacal laugh after the Mets do something great or somebody else like just combusts. I remember that it was that Mets comeback against the Phillies, and you just put out this insane laugh. When I see Scherzer on Monday, DeGrom on Tuesday, does that warrant a maniacal laugh from you?
It does. It absolutely does. I don't know if I could just do it on command, but I'll tell you, the thing that gets me really excited, you got a 5-game series, Mets Braves coming up. This is huge. I mean, talk about division at stake here. And the final 2 games of that series, or at least Saturday's a doubleheader. So one of those 3, Scherzer's going to start on Saturday, one of the games of the doubleheader. DeGrom starts Sunday. That's the advantage you have now. I mean, here you are going head to head against your division rival, and you got 2 of the greatest pitchers of this generation to try to close out a series victory. That's where the Mets are different than any team in baseball right now.
Yeah, I think so too. And the Yankees tried to move to make that happen. Obviously, we saw Garrett Cole suck yesterday. He allowed 6 runs in the first inning. We'll start with the Yankees. And again, we're going to go through every team that we think is plausible to make it out of the American or National League and get to the Fall Classic. We'll start with what the Yankees did at the deadline, and we're just going to look like surface level what's going on with these guys, because I'm going to let Javier Reyes on the back half of this episode try and whip me into a frenzy on the Padres. But we'll start with the Yankees. Frankie Montas was the big fish that they landed. Andrew Benintendi, a couple days before that, found a really intriguing swap between them and St. Louis. Jordan Montgomery to St. Louis for Harrison Bader, who's on the shelf right now, but should be back before the end of the season. You also had Lou Trevino in the Frankie Montas deal. And then you also get Joey Gallo out of town. You get Clayton Beeter in return, who is a starting pitching prospect that was in the Dodgers system, probably with a lot more relief risk than some other of those top flight Dodgers pitchers. But overall, adding Benny, adding Montas, adding Trevino, and adding a guy like Bader when he's healthy, you feel like the Yankees got better?
Yeah, I think so. Sam Lucchini did a really good article for us today talking about Benintendi's fit in that lineup. And it makes a lot of sense because you're trading Gallo for Benny. Obviously, Benny's having a much better season. We know that he was an all-star, but it's the on base, it's hitting for a high average. And what do you need when you have these sluggers? Do you really need another guy that's home run, walk, or strikeout like Gallo? Or do you want a guy that's standing on first base when Aaron Judge hits that home run? I think that's more valuable to this team. I think that was a huge addition. Obviously, Montes is the big, swing that they make at the deadline. That's the biggest move to get another frontline starter. That helps them a bunch. Like you said, Bader's even a solid move as well. It's not something that's going to, really move the needle too much. If that was all they did, you would think, okay, that's an underwhelming deadline like a lot of these teams. But as a little throw in at the end, I like Bader's game. I think he is a guy that'll play up, for a contender, can do a lot for you. I've been watching this year on the Mets side, someone like Travis Jankowski, who just got DFA'd. Yeah. When you have a roster, I think that fourth outfielder giving you speed and defense is what you want now. So Bader gives you that in spades. I think this is a really nice deadline for Cashman for sure.
I think so too. I think they wanted to emphasize not striking out and some speed and defense. And I think they got that offensively with Bader and with Benintendi. With Montas, you add that front line number 2. He was a 1, and he was a very competent 1 in Oakland. Garrett Cole obviously really struggled. Garrett Cole has a mid-3 ERA right now, but I don't think anybody can look me in the eye and make the argument that Garrett Cole is not the ace of a staff. Yeah. Garrett Cole is one of the best pitchers in baseball. He's making north of $300 million. There was a reason he signed that $300 million deal. So lining up Cole and Montas with Nestor Cortez, Jameson Taillon to follow. The Sevy injury hurts. Doesn't sound like Sevy's done. Do you feel like that is a World Series capable rotation as currently constructed without Severino?
Here's the thing, because I'm thinking about it in my head right now, and on paper and based on what they've done this year, absolutely. But I look at them and just go through the matchups against the Astros in the series. I still think that Houston has the edge. Like, I were you the one who was talking about how the Astros should be the favorites? That was you, right?
Yeah.
That was your take. It's a good take, man. I think the Astros are the favorites, and I mean, I don't want to transition right into them, but you're talking about what they did at the deadline. Mancini's swing with the Crawford boxes, it's perfect. That was such a good pickup to really boost that lineup. And yeah, if you stack up rotations, I like the Astros a little bit more, but the Yankees did enough here where, I mean, they should be able to, obviously they're winning the division, but they should be able to kind of breeze to the championship series, you would think.
We're preaching. It's you, me, and Aram against Peter right now with the Astros versus Yankee debate. And I'm totally
he has no
here
bias there at all.
No bias at all. We're going to work geographically from east to west.
Yes.
I'm going to mess up north and south at some point, but we will start by working a little bit farther west, and we're going to go north of the border. Toronto is the only other team in the AL East that I really want to talk about because I don't think Tampa and Boston are really worth our time because I don't think that they have a real shot to make it out. But knowing what Toronto's offense just did in the month of July, I think we'd be insane not to consider them a possibility of making it out of the American League just because the offense can get that hot. They added a really interesting name offensively, and that was the big pickup for them. They added a couple of relievers from the Marlins, and they added Mitch White from the Dodgers, but it was Whit Merrifield that was really the big pickup for them at the deadline. And the other wrinkle that I wasn't quite sure about was apparently Toronto said that the vaccination thing was up to Whit Merrifield. Like he might just be a road player a la Kyrie Irving in Brooklyn, which doesn't make any sense to me. He said a couple weeks ago that he would be open to getting vaccinated if it meant that he could play for a contender. Here you are, Whit. You're playing for a contender. Let's see if you get the shot. If he does get the shot, what does Whit Merrifield do for the Blue Jays offense?
He is, I think, one of the most interesting players that moved to this deadline because you look at what he did this year or what he's done this year, and it's not very impressive, but we know the track record and what he can bring to a winning team. I'm really curious how this change of scenery is going to work out for him. I think that he has obviously all the potential to really change things for this Blue Jays team, but also you're looking at a guy that, you know, is in the latter half of his career here. Who knows what they're going to get? And we see sometimes it's not easy to be a trade deadline acquisition and to just hit the ground running. It's not always Brandon Drury hitting a grand slam on your first at bat. Okay, that doesn't always happen. So I think it can go either way. But honestly, looking at what they did at the deadline overall, compared to the Yankees, compared to the Twins, some of the other teams in the American League, I'm a little underwhelmed with what the Blue Jays actually pulled off here.
I'm kind of underwhelmed too. I was hoping that they would go get pitching because obviously we know that pitching is the bugaboo, and you know you extended Jose Barrios big time. Like Kikuchi is struggling, Ryu is out, Manoah is obviously great. Gausman took a step back over the last month and a half, 2 months. I think Gausman's going to be fine, and he just had a great start earlier this week. So we'll see how the pitching holds up. But I'm with you. Like, I wish they just did more. A team that did a lot, the Minnesota Twins. They really hit it. They hit it well. They got Jorge Lopez, the all-star from the Orioles, to bolster that bullpen. They got Tyler Mahle from Cincinnati. They gave up some serious prospects. Spencer Steer went back to Cincinnati, and we love Spencer Steer at Just Baseball. But, I mean, adding a guy like Lopez to be your closer and move Yohan Duran, who's had an excellent season, to your setup role, and then have Mahle slide in as the 2 behind Sonny Gray. I think Minnesota got a lot better when Cleveland and the White Sox did absolutely nothing.
Absolutely. I think it's interesting that, for one, that they kind of prioritized the closer first to get Lopez. I think that was a really nice pickup because I think they weren't sure if they were going to get a starter. And then you end up getting one in Mahle, very similar to me to the Sonny Gray acquisition, both coming, you know, from that Reds team, guys that I think, you know, have more upside than maybe people kind of realize when they're playing in pitchers' ball or hitters' ballparks like Citizens Bank. Obviously, with Mahle, that's always been the story. Wasn't there a third edition too? Did they get another pitcher that I'm I'm blanking on. I feel like there was one more.
Minnesota got Lopez. They got Malley. There
There's
might have
one
been one
more.
more.
I'll pull it up. I got it because we can pump out an article this week on Friday. We're gonna do grades for every single team, and I was doing some of the prep work on that. I know there was three names that I had in there. All right, here we go. We got
Oh, we got Michael Fulmer.
there we go, Michael Fulmer.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Fulmer is another good pickup for that bullpen, and they got the catcher Sandy Leone, which was obviously not much of a move, but a little extra backup catcher. I really like all the pitching they brought in. This is a team that should win this division now, particularly like you said, with what the other two teams didn't do.
Yeah, I think so too. And like that division was so wide open, and Minnesota was a very flawed leader in that division. So I was thinking if the White Sox made the move for the left-handed corner outfield bat, I was thinking just offer up whatever you have for Jock Peterson. If this White Sox roster had Jock Peterson, we'd be talking about the White Sox as like the shoe-in for the odds-on favorite to win the division. If Cleveland went and got Sean Murphy, we're talking about this team as a sleeper to like kind of make it deep in the postseason because what they can do. Minnesota was always, I don't know. They addressed every spot that there were insecurities at, and the White Sox and the Guardians did not do that. Moving to the AL West, Trey Mancini, you mentioned, match made in heaven with the Crawford boxes. Christian Vasquez as a platoon catcher with Martin Maldonado, they'll split time, was an amazing pickup. I found the Will Smith for Jake Odorizzi deal with Atlanta to be very interesting. You get a guy who can be a closer. You're not asking him to be a closer. You're asking him to be a setup or a seventh inning guy. And I think that works really effectively. I think this team just made themselves the favorites in the American League, like we were talking about.
Yeah, I think they probably were maybe the favorites before, but now even more so. I mean, you pull, Yuli Gurriel out of the lineup, put Trey Mancini in there. It's a huge difference. And I was just looking at Mancini's spray chart at Minute Maid compared to, his games this year. And I was counting like 14 more home runs. I don't know. I know the expected home run metric doesn't have it quite that much, where suddenly he'd be like a 25 home run hitter, but he certainly would have a lot more than whatever he had, 9 or whatever it was this season. So you put him into that ballpark, you put him in the middle of that lineup. It just makes him that much scarier. That's a really deep team right now. And I think the Vasquez pickup is really great too. I mean, not many teams were able to kind of make a swing like that to get 2 impact starters. That's big time.
Big time. And I also love that Vasquez shit on Chaim Bloom, and within 48 hours, he was a Houston Astro. He was just switching clubhouses at Minute Maid Park. It was great. Last team in the American League that I want to touch on quick. We've talked about the Luis Castillo deal on this show. There were other sneaky deals that went through. Travis Jankowski was a waiver claim, which I found really interesting. He's not going to get legitimate at-bats, but he will get some at-bats in the final 2 months of the season. Thought Jake Lamb was a really interesting pickup in a trade with the Dodgers. And then they also got Kurt Casale. Casale was another guy and apparently a clubhouse guy. So Castillo was the big one. I think they just got a bunch of clubhouse guys. You think they got deeper? Do you think this is the same Mariners team that we were talking about right after they traded for Castillo?
I don't know if they've done too much more to kind of move the needle. The other move was Matt Boyd, a left-handed pitcher. So they made moves. I think that's good to add to your depth. I've been watching Jankowski all year. He's going to give you defense and speed. I wouldn't want him to take too many at bats. He's not going to hit very much. Jake Lamb's always the guy that you feel like can get hot and actually surprise you for a month. So if they get lucky, maybe they get that out of him. The bottom line to me is Castillo. I mean, I know we've talked about it, I'm sure, on the show, but you add him to that team with Robbie Ray. You got J-Rod out there. This is hopefully the team that will break that drought and make the playoffs.
I think they will, man. Like if you've got Luis Castillo running out there and getting wins over the Yankees and the Bronx, and then you've got Robbie Ray pitching the way he is, and then you also have Logan Gilbert pitching the way he is, I think this team is really set up for success. Mets.
Real quick, Jack. There's something that I don't know why. I don't know if it's maybe some inner Yankees hatred that I have that deep down. I don't know. But I feel like we were talking about Castillo and Montes like head and head like the whole time. Like these guys, it's the same thing. Get either one of them. For some reason, I'm starting to think that Castillo is really a better pitcher here. Like, do you think that the Yankees look a lot different if they make everything's the same, but they get Castillo instead of Montes?
I think Castillo is the better pitcher. And I think when we first started diving into the deadline conversation 2 weeks ago, when we started to, even think about Daniel Vogelbach moving from Pittsburgh to the Mets, we were looking at Montas as the safe bet, as, compared to Luis Castillo, who lower floor, higher ceiling. I think what we've seen from Luis Castillo since that dialogue started has totally shifted the narrative.
Yeah.
And I think Luis Castillo is electric. I think that a lot of teams were concerned about Frankie Montas' shoulder. And here we are having this conversation. Well, the Yankees, I don't know. But, the Mariners got Luis Castillo. I do think it's what you're saying. I think there's some anti-Yankee bias here where we want the Yankees to get the lesser of the two. But at the end of the day, if I have one of them starting a wild card game for me, I think it's probably Luis Castillo, because I know that the D grade Frankie Montas is going to be better than the D grade Castillo, but the A grade Castillo, I don't know who's better than that in baseball.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And again, it's just funny because I always looked at them as kind of the same pitcher at this deadline. And then, the last couple starts of the Castillo, he's just been so dynamic. It's going to be interesting to see how it shakes out. I mean, for all we know, Montes is about to go on an incredible run with the Yankees, and he'll make me eat my words here. But just an interesting thought I wanted to point out there.
We haven't gotten your thoughts on Tyler Naquin yet. We talked a little bit about the Vogelbach, Darren Ruff platoon, and you mentioned Michael Givens, but Naquin, that's a good bench bat to add. I thought it was a decent add. What did you think when Tyler Naquin became a Met? I saw so many people saying who cares? Why? He's a good bench bat. Good teams need bench bats.
To me, it's upgrading over Jankowski. And the bottom line here is, if you look at the Mets this year, there was 3 weak points on this roster all season. It was Dom Smith, J.D. Davis, and Travis Jankowski. Yeah. They've replaced all 3 of them. That's what they did. Vogelbach to replace Dom. You get Ruff, and you literally trade JD in the deal, which made me so happy. So happy. I am so done watching JD Davis play baseball. I'll never tune in again. If he's playing against the Mets, I'm going to look away from the TV when he's swinging. I don't want to see it. But yeah, that's what they did. And Naquin, to me, the one thing that actually concerns me about that pickup is I hope he doesn't eat into Mark Canha's playing time too much. That's the only thing. Because Canha has reverse splits this year, and Buck Showalter can get a little bit he's so old school with that, where it's just, I'm going to throw my lefty out there against every righty, my righty out there against every lefty. And I don't know if that's the wisest way to go about it. So that's the one thing that I'm a little bit apprehensive of. But I do think that there's no doubt in my mind that Naquin's giving you better at bats than Travis Jankowski.
Yeah, I think so too. Moving to Philly, we'll keep the Phillies really, really brief, because I think Dave Dombrowski did a really good job this deadline. Brandon Marsh acquired for Logan O'Hoppe, who is a really good catching prospect, but Marsh is a really good defensive center fielder, and they're hoping that a change of scenery will help him hit a little bit more. Edmundo Sosa was acquired to be the third middle infielder. He can play short, and he can play second. Sosa could probably play elsewhere. Noah Syndergaard was also acquired from the Angels, and then David Robertson also came back. Wild card team, yes or no?
It's tough because it's basically them and the Cardinals, right? I feel like at this point, you look at how it stacks up. The Padres, how are they not going to get a wild card at this point, right? You look at the Mets and the Braves. One of those teams, whoever's not winning the division, is going to get a wild card. So then it comes down to the Cardinals and the Phillies, I think. And that's an interesting race, because the Cardinals, they make the playoffs almost every year. The Phillies, they don't. So I like the moves they made. I think they did a good job staying away from the prospects they couldn't deal. Otherwise, it would have set them back too much. Robertson's a good closer for them. I think Syndergaard will give them some good starts. They improved their defense. I think they did the right thing, but I still don't know if I would bet on them to make the playoffs. I think it's going to come down to the wire.
It's tough, and they have to continue to hit the way that they have hit since Joe Girardi was fired. And I think they just have to be better defensively flat out. And I think that Brandon Marsh really helps them do that. They're not catching Atlanta, who's the other top dog with the Mets in the NL East. They added Eddie Adrianza, my king. They added Robbie Grossman, who they're hoping ticks up after a really underwhelming first couple of months in Detroit this year. They also added Jake Odorizzi to the rotation, and Raisel Iglesias, who just signed that extension. they're hoping that he respawns as an incredible closer type in Atlanta. I think Atlanta got really good. How scared are you on a scale of 1 to 10 that they nip the Mets and they win the NL East?
Honestly, I don't think the deadline changes it for me. Like they made some solid picks. I think that they're a little bit overvalued though. Like
Yeah.
I heard a lot of people kind of giving the Braves like, oh, they did it again, the same thing they did last
Yeah, I
deadline.
saw that with Robbie Grossman. It's like, oh, okay, like he might be really good, but you can't bank on him being Eddie Rosario.
Yeah, yeah. And obviously you look at his splits, and I mean, great against lefties this year. He's hitting 360. So that's the one tool he brings to this team that I think really did improve the roster. But you send out Jesse Chavez in the trade for Iglesias. I know Iglesias is way more dynamic as a reliever and can be a lockdown closer for you, but Chavez was having a good year. So I mean, the bullpen gets marginally better. I think it's still, though, to me, I'm more scared of the Braves because of the homegrown talent that's dominating, not the couple ancillary pieces they brought back. It's Michael Harris, it's Austin Riley, it's Dansby Swanson, it's Acuna, it's Contreras and d'Arnaud. It's that lineup that has been so good since whatever that date is when Harris got called up, and they've been the best team in baseball. That's what scares me. The deadline moves to me didn't really do too much.
They didn't do too much for me either. I think the big one that I'm looking at is Raisel Iglesias, because if Iglesias somehow had a fire lit under his ass, I think we're looking at a lights out bullpen, night shift type bullpen, even with Luke Jackson being out for the year, because you've got Minter and you've got Iglesias at the back end that is just incredible.
Yeah.
Milwaukee got worse. Obviously, they trade Josh Hader for Taylor Rogers and a prospect return. The Nashville Sounds look great. Hey, they're leading the International League's West Division. Good on them. They just got a great outfield. But you're in first place in the NL Central. And your moves at the deadline were for Trevor Rosenthal, who's currently on the IL, Taylor Rogers, who is in return for the best closer in the game, not named Edwin Diaz right now. Sorry, Fink. And then Matt Bush, who is, a veteran reliever, moved around a little bit. I was hoping the Brewers did a lot more, and the fact that they did nothing offensively kind of put the nail in their coffin for me. Like, they're not real. They're not actually going to contend this year.
It all comes down to Estuary Ruiz and way too much pressure to put on him. I mean, that's what it comes down to. And honestly, when I look at what they did, I don't think I hate it as much as other people as far as the Hader trade. How much more value was he going to, what was it, one more year left after this deadline?
One more year. So he was making, I think, 13 this year. He was going to make around 15 in his final year arbitration this year, or next year, pardon, and then he was going to hit the open market.
I feel like they were in a position where they're too good that they just kept on getting into these spots where they couldn't maybe capitalize on that Hader trade chip when they maybe should have. And this was kind of a half measure. Say, all right, we'll flip closers. Hopefully that doesn't change us too much. We know we got Devin Williams ready to step into the real closer job anyway. Yeah. But I do think that if Ruiz ends up being a quality starter for the next 6 years, which is, again, asking a lot, but if that happens, you're going to look back and say that was a good trade. So I feel like there's still a chance this works out for them. I don't think it really completely knocks them off, where now the Cardinals are definitely going to catch them. I think they can still win this division. But yeah, I almost think it was them admitting that they're not as good as the other teams in the National League. Maybe that's part of it. You don't think that you're actually going to win a playoff series against the Dodgers, the Mets. You just help the Padres and make them even tougher to beat. But, the Braves, I think maybe that's part of it. But it's just another move that kind of keeps a team like the Brewers in the middle instead of pushing your chips in and trying to go for it.
Yeah, the guy that I work with for Indianapolis Indians games, previous guest on this show, Howard Kellman, who's been the voice of the Indians, we were talking about it, and he said, I understand that it's a good baseball move, but it would have gone over far better with the fan base and with the team, because Devin Williams was outspoken about not liking the move. I think it would have gone over better with the fan base and with the team if they waited until the offseason to do it. And I'm with you. Yeah. I think that the return would have been a bit diminished. I think that they got a great return for a reliever, but it's Josh Hader and you're a first place team. Last team I want to go over, because I'll save the Dodgers for Javi, and I'll let him just praise the Padres for all they're worth. But the Cardinals needed 2 starting pitchers, and they got 2 starting pitchers. They got one guy who everybody knew was on the move, and they got one guy who I think nobody knew was on the move. They got Jose Quintana from Pittsburgh, And then they got Jordan Montgomery in that flip for Harrison Bader. Bader was the odd man out in the outfield. Montgomery and Quintana, you just added two really good left-handed pitchers to a rotation. I feel like the Cardinals should be in the driver's seat right now, considering what Milwaukee didn't do and what St. Louis did to win this division.
And last year they did what? It was Lester. Who was the other one?
J.A. Happ.
Lester and J.A. Happ, and it worked.
It worked.
So now you got two much better pitchers this time around. I think that the team is even looking a little bit better because Goldschmidt's just on a different planet this season. So yeah, I like the Cardinals a lot. That's why I said, when it comes to the Phillies, like I put my money on the Cardinals over the Phillies right now. And I think that's what it comes down to, which will be a really good race, I think. But they just got the arms that they needed to really go for it here and at least, put the best foot forward to try to win this. But the thing is, they could have gone nuclear, right? They could have got Juan Soto.
Yeah,
so it still makes it a little bit underwhelming because we thought they were in the mix for all these other big names, but they always add the right pieces. And for St. Louis, it usually works out.
We'll see. Fink, you are the man for joining me. Thank you much.